Coming up on Bridge City News, doctors say U.S. President Donald Trump is doing very well while he spends the weekend at the Walter Reed Military Hospital. Joe Biden urges Americans to wear masks and not underestimate the seriousness of COVID-19. And today we feature a tasty vendor at the Lethbridge Farmers Market.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition.
Thank you for joining us. Doctors say U.S. President Donald Trump is doing very well as he spends the weekend at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. He's currently receiving treatment for COVID-19 after his positive diagnosis for the virus this week.
At this time, the team and I are extremely happy with the progress the president has made. Thursday, he had a mild cough and some nasal congestion and fatigue, all of which are now resolving and improving.
He's receiving outstanding multidisciplinary care, the state of the science for coronavirus infection. We are monitoring him very closely for any evidence of complications from either the coronavirus illness or the therapies that we are prescribing to make him better. We have monitored his cardiac function, his kidney function, his liver function. All of those are normal. And the president this morning is not on oxygen, not having difficulty breathing or walking around the White House medical unit upstairs. He's in exceptionally good spirits, and in fact, as we were completing our multidisciplinary rounds this morning, the quote he left us with was, "I feel like I could walk out of here today," and that was a very encouraging.
On Saturday, supporters of Donald Trump assembled outside the military hospital where he is staying to cheer on his recovery. Democratic presidential candidate Joe Biden says President Donald Trump testing positive for coronavirus is a bracing reminder of the seriousness of COVID-19. He urged U.S. citizens that this cannot be a partisan moment. It must be an American moment.
Look, I'd like to start by acknowledging, which I'm sure all of you do as well, sending my prayers for the health and safety of the First Lady and President of the United States after they tested positive for COVID-19. My wife Jill and I prayed that they'll make a quick and full recovery. This is not a matter of politics. It's a bracing reminder to all of us that we have to take this virus seriously. It's not going away automatically. We have to do our part to be responsible. It means following the science, listening to the experts, washing our hands, social distancing. It means wearing a mask in public, and it means encouraging others to do so as well. We can save 100,000 lives in the next 100 days, according to the head of the CDC, if everyone wears a mask in public. So be patriotic. It's not about being a tough guy. It's about doing your part. Wearing a mask is not only going to protect you, but it also protects those around you. Your mom, your dad, your brother, your sister, husband, wife, neighbor, coworker.
BCN was at the Lethbridge Farmers Market today, and we got to see what the buzz was all about with one sweet vendor. Dewara Aperies is a family-owned and operated beekeeping farm located in central Alberta. They currently run over 1,000 hives and raise their own bee stock. They produce mild, full-flavored honey locally sourced from mainly clover flowers and also dandelions. Aside from honey, their other products include beeswax, lip balm, and hand cream recipes. Chances are that you or someone you know has been impacted by Alzheimer's. The progressive disease is being studied all over the world, including right here in Lethbridge. The University of Lethbridge recently received a $1 million grant over 3 years to develop treatments. Researcher Brendan McAllister spoke about some of the new technologies that he will have access to.
What we're hoping to do is by basically targeting a certain ion transporter that's expressed on brain cells, we hope to increase the inhibitory signaling in the brain and kind of correct that imbalance early in the course of the disease. which hopefully will prevent further progression of the disease, or at least slow it. I really think to come up with something, we need to try a whole bunch of different treatment strategies. And so I think it's exciting that we can contribute something new there that will, it's a very early stage. Still, of course, we're still testing it out on mice, and that's, a long way from testing it on people. But, hopefully there'll be something promising there, and, might eventually down the road lead to some treatments that will hopefully help patients.
We get really excited about that because we work with people living with dementia and their families and their care partners every day. And so if every piece of information that we can pass on that is founded in evidence created through research is just a really good thing.
This grant is the first for the University of Lethbridge from the Weston Brain Institute. Depression and mental health issues are a big topic of discussion these days, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic. The Canadian Mental Health Association in Southern Alberta is offering programs and services to help during these difficult times. The group has a crisis line for people who may be in distress and community links for those looking to connect with services for help.
We let people identify if they say it's a crisis to them, it's a crisis to us, and we'll take it just as seriously. We're not going to define what crisis means for individuals, but we'll support people and triage them and try and get them the support they need. We're definitely seeing more anxiety, more stress in the community, which leads into other things such as depression and other mental illnesses. As we're coming up on Mental Illness Awareness Week next week, actually. We're definitely aware that there are people who are suffering through, but also people who are thriving with these chronic mental illnesses.
More information on the CMHA programs can be found on their website. Parents and caregivers across Southern Alberta have struggled to make the decision of having their child attend school in person, online, or homeschooled due to the pandemic. One of the highlights of students going back is school photos. The Galt Museum provided that opportunity Friday afternoon through a special fundraiser they hosted.
Today we are doing our back to school photo fundraiser that we've planned right here at the Galt Museum. We've invited families that have children to come and book a spot so that they can get school photos taken of their kids, because we know that that's a big milestone every year for families. They display them on their walls, they keep them. It's this great marker of how time is passing, and we really wanted to be able to provide something that would help increase the feel of normality this year.
Rattan says there were approximately 48 spots open, and they were fully booked.
One of the things that we are excited about is we've asked the parents for permission to archive the photos so that we have a historical record of how COVID has impacted families as well as the public school system and the education opportunities that students are enjoying for those who are doing virtual school, homeschooling, or who are continuing to be at school, but in a different way.
There was no cost to the photos. The Galt asked for donations instead.
With the Friends of the Galt Endowment Fund, it was set up a couple of years ago in order to create that safe hold for future generations for the Galt Museum. We love what we do now, but we want to make sure that there's still a museum here and the programs, the top-notch programs and events and everything that happen here for future generations. And so putting it into the endowment fund, which we have been doing throughout the last few years, helps that initiative and helps us be able to prepare well for the future.
Rodler says future photo shoots might be in the works for the Galt, but that also depends on the success of the current photo shoot.
Depending on how things turn out from this one, we could look at doing additional photo shoots for these kids. Anybody that's been coming in here right now has been saying this has been a wonderful idea. It makes us feel included for getting those headshots and getting those school shots that everybody so treasures for Christmas presents and whatnot. So they're all walking out with smiles on their faces with that.
Recapping one of our top news stories. Doctors say U.S. President Donald Trump is doing very well as he spends the weekend at Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. He's currently receiving treatment for COVID-19 after his positive diagnosis for the virus this week. And a look at weekend weather. Tonight, clear with skies becoming hazy late this evening and overnight, and a low of 9. Tomorrow, mainly sunny with increasing cloudiness in the afternoon and a high of 26.
if you look at how reputable Quebec separatism is, if you find out that somebody used to be a Quebec separatist, that they wanted Quebec out of Canada and said Canada was wretched, and now they're like, well, maybe Canada's actually pretty lucrative, everybody's like, that's fine, come to the cocktail party. Here, we'll appoint you to things. We'll love to have you as a candidate. And yet Western separatism is who let this into the room. And that's part of the problem. Either Quebec separatism ought to be a career killer and you never get invited to parties, or else Western separatism should be treated as, that's an interesting perspective. Let's talk about how to make sure it's not the right answer.
There is so much going on in our country right now with the second wave of COVID-19, the recent throne speech, and the changing of leadership in the Conservative Party, with Aaron O'Toole taking over from Andrew Scheer. To help sort out many of these big events happening in Canada today is John Robson, a columnist with the National Post, who joins me now from Ottawa. Welcome back to BCN, John.
Good to be here.
Now, John, let's start off talking about the throne speech. The Liberal Party is promising to create another 1 million jobs. They've also changed their minds about winding down the federal wage subsidy and to build a national childcare program. Now, is this a lot of just pomp and ceremony, a lot of talk, or do you think any of these things will actually happen?
Well, there's a third possibility, which is that they really intend for it to happen, but they don't know how to do it. And that one should never be ruled out. I mean, obviously, Justin Trudeau and his colleagues are not hampered by doubt about their own marvelousness when it comes both to their morals and to their proficiency in designing and executing programs. And they say they're going to create 1 million jobs. They almost certainly think they will create 1 million jobs. Though I always wonder in these situations, well, if you knew how to do that, why didn't you do it 2-3 years ago? I mean, hey, great, you can create jobs. There are unemployed people. Let's do this. But, you know, they have a computer program that says if you do this, you'll have 1 million jobs. And then they'll do it. And then they'll run it through the computer program a second time and say, well, the computer says we created 1 million jobs. And you'll say, well, you actually just ran the same simulation twice. They're like, what? But they do think they can do this stuff. You know, they think they can give us all childcare. They think they can conjure money out of thin air. So they really do mean it. And they don't spend a lot of time looking back at what they said in the past they were going to do and asking, gee, how did that turn out? Because that, I mean, that might prove discouraging, but they don't discourage easily. So I'm sure they intend to do it. And if they think they can spend indefinitely, you know, oh, well, low interest rates is not a problem. So we can keep handing out wage subsidies and so on. We can spend money on anything. You know, during the summer, the Prime Minister was announcing $1 billion in spending a day or so, it felt. And there was never any sense that, okay, maybe we'll take a day off here because that's a lot of money. It was always, what else can we do for nothing but numbers in a ledger? I mean, what's a number in a ledger? That costs us nothing, whereas you get all this good stuff and then you vote for us. So yeah, I imagine they really will try and do a lot of this, but I don't think we're going to see a lot of results, but not because they didn't mean it.
The throne speech did nothing to address climate change, economic inequality, and systemic racism due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Do you think this maybe hurt the Liberals and Justin Trudeau?
I don't think so. You see, one of the problems is that all these guys really know how to do now, guys and gals, is give a campaign speech. Everything they give is fundamentally the stump speech. And so right now it's like, oh, polls say people are worried about COVID, so you talk about COVID. It doesn't have any real impact on your agenda. The idea that the throne speech would be a sober way of alerting legislators to what the executive was going to be sending down the pipe so that they could give a reasonable, informed response to it is long gone. I'm actually having an interesting debate with people on Twitter over, there's a requirement in our Constitution that says the Commons cannot appropriate money for any purpose that is not first outlined by a message from the Governor General in that session. And some people are saying that just means every bill has to have a little note from the Governor General saying, please spend this money, which is so that private members' bills can't spend money. But I say the throne speech needs to contain fairly specific undertakings that the MPs can then think about. But it's all just sort of feel-good stuff. And if Trudeau wakes up tomorrow morning and decides he needs a Green New Deal, he'll put one through Parliament without regard for it having been in the throne speech. So it's really not very useful. It doesn't tell us what the government really thinks it should do. It just tells us what the government thinks we think it should do. And that makes it, there's a lot of sound and fury, but signifying far too little. I've seen British throne speeches from decades ago that were very dry and sober. The government will introduce a bill to regulate shipping, and it will do the following things. You know, the government will, and quite dry and detailed, and then legislators could check this off as they went through the year, as opposed to, we will save you all from purple dragons, whatever they may be.
Now, the Conservatives were not impressed, and were not willing to support the throne speech, John. Deputy Party Leader Candice Bergen says she wanted to see more help for Canadians who are falling through the cracks of the pandemic aid programs, including single moms, oil workers, and fishermen.
Yeah, so the Liberals say they're going to spend, billions of dollars on every person who they can find, and the Conservatives say, hey, here are some people you missed, spend more, which it makes you wonder why you have a Conservative Party. Why not just have another Liberal Party? Because it's astonishing the extent to which the Conservatives have bought into the government can do everything, and it has a magic money tree view. Which again, I guess pollsters tell them this poll as well. Don't go telling people there's no free lunch. They won't like you. And there's nothing to be gained in this world or the next by telling people the truth and hoping that they're willing to meet you halfway. And again, you look at the press releases that come from any of the opposition parties, and you think to yourself, they wrote that ahead of time, didn't they? And then they just tweaked it a little and put it out. You don't have to ask yourself, what Conservatives weren't going to say, hey, that was a great throne speech, nor are they going to say we have too much government. So they're going to complain that the handouts weren't tailored in quite the right way to quite the right people, including our constituents, who should have even more money from the public treasury. So that's politics for you these days.
Now let's talk about Canada's debt, which is around $1 trillion. You talk about that money tree here. We have a deficit of over $343 billion. With all of the spending going on, will we ever get back to black? Will we ever get the spending under control, John?
It doesn't seem very likely. I mean, as you may remember, last time we elected the Conservatives, they went and ran a $50 billion deficit and told us that deficits stimulate the economy, which they'd spent decades telling us they didn't. And then suddenly it was like, hey, we could buy votes with this. And then they lost the election. So I guess they weren't good at it. And they were gradually staggering back toward balance, but not in such a way that the structural problems, in my view, were addressed. That the government is in a bidding war, the political parties are, over the available votes in swing ridings. And the way you get votes is that you improve the sweet deal for voters, and you do that by loading it onto future generations. And now, of course, I mean, governments have had their foot to the floor on monetary policy since 2008 with, it seems to me, rather indifferent results. But they're hooked on low interest rates. They can't let them get back to a kind of market clearing rate. And this, of course, is good for borrowers and bad for lenders, which means, and then you wonder why Canada's savings rate is low. So, I mean, do you see the Trudeau Liberals suddenly deciding to cut $100 billion in spending? Do you see the provincial governments saying, you know what, the healthcare system is really unsustainable, we need to reform it? Healthcare is taking, 40+% of every provincial budget program spending, and it's just getting worse as the population ages. And as now, of course, the waiting lists have sort of doubled with the pandemic, and they were getting longer anyway. And nobody's willing to say we have too much government and therefore we should have less. That's the thing that nobody says except me, and I'm regarded as kind of this irritating crank, but that's fine by me. But no, I mean, until you get a party that says we have too much government, and if you have too much government, you should have less government, then it's just inconceivable that we will get off this treadmill of spending ever more money in an attempt to attract votes from other parties that are also hurling the stuff out the window as fast as they can grab it with both hands and fling.
Do you think we'll see a federal election anytime soon here in Canada?
I rather doubt it. We obviously, the Liberals could lose the confidence of their coalition partners, but I don't think anybody really wants an election, especially during the pandemic. Nobody wants to be blamed for causing an election. And frankly, what is the NDP going to get more spending after an election than before? Is the Bloc going to have better leverage? Are the Conservatives ready to fight? Are the Liberals confident that they would win? It seems to me that none of them really want one. And we'll also have to watch what happens in BC, where John Horgan, they've got fixed election dates, and he signed a written pledge not to go early, and then he went early and said, well, haha, I feel like it. If he gets pummeled by voters for this, that will make it even less likely that we'll have one. But again, what's the point? How do we end up different? Never mind better. How are things really different if we have an election? I don't see the Liberals winning a smashing majority. I don't see the NDP winning more seats than they've got. I don't see the Tories winning. So it's just a lot of fuss, and they all go back to doing what they're already doing without having to try and stump the country when you're not allowed to shake a voter's hand because they'll think you tried to give them bubonic plague.
Aaron O'Toole has taken over the reins of the Conservative Party of Canada. Many argue that O'Toole is a red Tory, John, and that'll leave the Social Conservatives on the outside looking in. What are your thoughts?
It's certainly revealing. I mean, he ran against Peter MacKay saying, I'm true blue, Peter MacKay's a red Tory, and Peter MacKay is a red Tory, so he lost. And then O'Toole immediately comes out and says, oh, well, I'm into the progressive sexual agenda, and I really like unions, and I want managed trade, and I'm going to meet the Paris Accord. We went through a leadership race for that. It's like you're Justin Trudeau without the charisma, and we don't even like Justin Trudeau with the charisma. So why? What's it for? What does Erin O'Toole stand for that is strikingly conservative? As I asked in a column recently, what is government currently doing that he would have it stop doing? Never mind, throw the social conservatives under the bus. Everybody hates them. Nobody knows those people. Forget about strengthening defense because we can't find the money. Let's just cling to the libertarian, the last tussock of dry ground for conservatives. Where would you cut government? And if you can't even answer that, it seems to me that there's nothing good is suddenly going to happen. He's not suddenly in 3 months going to go, hey, guess what? I'm really right wing. What you see is what you get. He's getting advice from pollsters, and he wants to be liked by progressives. And to be liked by progressives, you have to insist that you too think conservatives are yucky people. What's he going to do for the unborn? Absolutely nothing. Not a thing.
Now, O'Toole launched his leadership campaign in Calgary. He seemed to have the support at that time from Alberta Premier Jason Kenney. John, do you think O'Toole will be a good advocate on behalf of the Western Canadian provinces?
I think he'll do an adequate job, probably rhetorically. But again, he's all in on global warming, right? He's into meeting the Paris targets, so that means you're into a carbon tax or something else. You can't destroy the fossil fuel industry and save it at the same time. You'll just wind up, bouncing the corpse or something. You've got to take on this climate change stuff on the basis of the science, or else you can't fight it on the policy. And O'Toole has this cunning plan where he will sidle left and somehow gain power by sneaking up on the Liberals, who he thinks are politically clueless, which is the last thing they are. And by which point he'll have compromised his agenda so much that what good could it possibly do? I mean, the Liberals already bought the pipeline. What more can you say at this point? It's just so odd to me that so many people go into politics as conservatives in order to make sure that no conservative option is ever actually presented to voters. And it looks as though Erin O'Toole is another one of that crowd. Your tie's the wrong color, sir. It ought to be red. And that's just about all there is to it.
I guess maybe if O'Toole does become Prime Minister one day, he can always say, Bill C-48, C-69, they're gone. Now, John, will O'Toole taking over lead maybe to more support for Maxime Bernier and the People's Party of Canada? And what about Separatist Party, Maverick Party, led by interim leader Jay Hill?
It's an interesting question. I mean, I obviously like Maxime Bernier's party for its libertarianism and its willingness to challenge taboos. I sometimes wonder if the people on the Twitter feed aren't 23 years old, which isn't the best idea you could possibly have. But it seems to me, I mean, one thing for poor Maxime Bernier, he couldn't possibly have less support. He's far too sensible and honest, it seems, to attract broad support, but he couldn't have less, so I think he'll have more. I don't know that Western separatism is yet a viable political force, but I do think, remember with Mulroney and the C-18 maintenance decision, which looked like such a small thing at the time and turned out to be huge. I think it's like these wildfires that we're having. There's a big fuel load out there, and a couple of things could ignite it. So I don't think that the people in central Canada, by and large, understand that, especially not, the so-called Laurentian elite. They don't grasp the degree to which under the surface Westerners feel disrespected in ways that are potentially quite dangerous. So I do worry that Western separatism might take flight instead of libertarianism. And I'm not against, I understand the West grievances, and I think they need to be met. I'm a proud Canadian, but I'm not, the word Canada doesn't justify anything. There are things that if Canada does it, Alberta and Saskatchewan would be right to go it alone. It's important to realize that that is true, and then make sure you don't go anywhere near that kind of thing. And if you look at how reputable Quebec separatism is, if you find out that somebody used to be a Quebec separatist, that they wanted Quebec out of Canada and said Canada was wretched, and now they're like, well, maybe Canada's actually pretty lucrative. Everybody's like, that's fine. Come to the cocktail party. Here, we'll appoint you to things. We'll love to have you as a candidate. And yet Western separatism is who let this leper into the room. And that's part of the problem. Either Quebec separatism ought to be a career killer and you never get invited to parties, or else Western separatism should be treated as, that's an interesting perspective. Let's talk about how to make sure it's not the right answer. And we really, we've done a couple of conferences out in Calgary and out in Alberta with the Economic Education Association of Alberta, where we've said, okay, well, what are the benefits? What are the costs? And the whole way we've said, look, We're trying to understand rationally what the options are. What's on one side of the scale, what's on the other. It's not a magic bullet, but it's also not unthinkable. And the more people treat it as though it's just ridiculous, the more thinkable it's going to become. So if you love Canada, don't do it.
You know, John, I often chat with one of our regular contributors, American journalist Lisa Daftari, about the upcoming U.S. federal election in November. Let's get your thoughts as a Canadian journalist. Would Joe Biden and the Democrats winning be a good thing for Canada, or is it better if Donald Trump and the Republicans get reelected?
Wow. Which side of my head would I like to be punched on hard? You know, I'm a real unfan of Donald Trump. Mind you, I also thought he couldn't win in 2016. I didn't think he'd get the nomination. So, you know, as a prognosticator, I'm a little bit suspicious. But I think that Joe Biden, I honestly believe that his health is not up to the job. I think you need to be asking yourself about Kamala Harris as president if the Democrats win, because I don't believe Biden, I literally don't think he's capable of doing the job. The Democrats are likely to win. The electoral map favors them and has for years, but the campaign's not going as well as it should. The ghost of Hillary Clinton's defeat hovers over them. And I got a very interesting interactive news story from NBC where they'd shown you a bunch of key demographics. And this is how they split in partisan terms. This is how their voting turnout is. And you could slide them and see what it would take for Trump to win. And it takes a reasonably small change in Hispanic and Black American votes in the direction of the Republicans to make a Trump victory a real possibility. And one of the problems the Democrats have, and they've had this since the Nixon years, is their apparent sympathy for urban unrest is profoundly upsetting, including to people who live in poor neighborhoods. They may in principle think the Republicans aren't on their side, but boy, the violence in the streets really scares people, and rightly so. And the Democrats could certainly lose this election. But if Biden wins, well, you know, he's kind of a standard New Deal liberal. You know, you always want to say in partisan terms, this is the election of our lifetime, and he'd be the worst than the worst thing ever. People said that about Barack Obama. I thought he wasn't a very good president, but it wasn't. The world didn't end. Life went on. I think Biden would probably be kind of, you know, middle of the pack, left-leaning Democratic president, which I don't want, but I don't fear it. I fear a climate in which people like Donald Trump can get the nomination, and then the Democrats could nominate someone so much worse they lost the election. Like, if you were given the task of losing the 2016 election to Donald Trump, you wouldn't know where to start. The polarization, the lack of sympathy, the gutter rhetoric, the explosions of rage and obscenity on Twitter, all of this stuff is coming from both sides. That's what scares me a lot more than the thought that we might get. We've somehow survived Donald Trump presidency. We could probably survive another term for Trump. We could survive a Biden presidency. But why must this be the choice? That's the question I wish voters would ask themselves. We can do better. Both parties can do better, and both parties should do better.
National Post columnist John Robson, thanks for joining me today from Ottawa.
Always a pleasure.
Many young people today love technology, the more the better, and not just in the video gaming world. Now, there's a young entrepreneur in Carbon, Alberta, who's pushing tech learning for rural-based kids. 15-year-old Luke Zielinski says kids today should have equal opportunities for learning about computer programming and agriculture. Luke joins me now from Carbon, which is located about 100 kilometers northeast of Calgary. Luke, welcome to Bridge City News.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This is really exciting.
That's great to hear. Now, Luke, you're not the typical farm boy. Long gone are the days of coveralls and pitchforks. You say today when it comes to farming, it's more important about learning about technology and how we can really help our farmers and ranchers.
That is true. I mean, apart from things like the space industry and a couple of others, farming is one of the fastest advancing fields out there in terms of technology.
Now, you're still in high school, but you've launched a new company and some software that you say will give farm kids a fair shake when it comes to learning. Tell me more about that.
Yep. Well, it's kind of like little learning modules that anyone can do on their free time or when they have time away from school or time away from work or part-time jobs. Just, you know, lessons that they can learn and things that they can pick up, you know, do it kind of however and whenever they want. And they can learn some valuable farm skills and technology skills along the way too.
So what's the name of your company?
Ag Tech STEAM.
And what inspired you to launch the company?
Well, I saw this problem. In the school I used to go to, the internet was bad. Two, there wasn't a lot of opportunities for decent programming. I mean, at the school we were lucky enough to get a 3D printer, but that was one of the most technologically advanced things we had at the school. So I looked at that problem and I thought, what what if we had an online tool that could, utilize other cheaper tools and anyone could do regardless of internet speed or where they are in terms of closest to the nearest city, because most farm kids parents don't have a vehicle that's exactly good for maneuvering in cities like Lethbridge or Calgary or Edmonton. And you know for me it takes an hour to get to Calgary from where we are at. And I went to a summer camp back in June 2018, 2017, one of those 2 years. And I had to get up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning just so that we could get there on time for the camp to begin, the robotics camp I was going to.
Now, your company, as you mentioned, is called AgTech STEAM. Is there an acronym? Does it actually stand for anything?
Well, AgTech STEAM stands for Science, Technology, Engineering, Art, and Math.
Okay. And why did you choose those areas?
Because those are some of the most important areas, because agriculture is very scientifically oriented with fertilizer and chemicals, insects, and technology, because of all the new technology that's coming out, like the dot, all the GPS systems and field systems. Engineering, because there's tractor building, there's shops, service trucks, and mechanics. Art, because there's something beautiful about looking at a field of golden wheat, and that can expand your mind. And math, because there's a lot of mathematical things that go into agriculture as well, like how much fertilizer am I using, how much pesticide is going to harm this crop, like that kind of thing.
So, Luke, what are some of the biggest challenges that you feel farmers are facing today?
I say some of the biggest challenges farmers are facing today are things from the outside. Like there's a lot of misconception going around that, big agriculture nowadays is bad for the environment, and it's just generally a bad practice, that farmers are cruel to their animals and that it's not ethical, when really that isn't true at all. And that's, I say, one of the industry's biggest problems is misconception and stereotypes.
Luke, how well has your company and software been received so far?
It's been received extremely well. I've gotten support from Farm Canada and from Olds College Science and Division. I've gotten interest in many unusual places. I've gotten interviewed by a man in the United States named Tim Hammermich, and I've even gotten interest from some people who've connected with me on Twitter from Nigeria and India and even the UK.
Wait a minute, it's not a Nigerian prince, though, is it? Stay away from that guy.
Nope.
Okay, well,
yeah, it's not a
good.
Nigerian prince.
Okay. Now, you have some serious backers for your company, including Farm Credit Canada. You mentioned Olds College, even Lethbridge College. How did all of that come to be?
Farm Credit Canada discovered me at the Ag Smart show at Olds when we got a booth. Our old friend John Pasharuk, he invited the vice president of FCC over, and the vice president, Fred, he said, "I really like your idea. We want to sponsor you." And I was just amazed that someone so quickly, because I had only came up with AgTech STEAM in 2019, like in January 2019.
Right. Now, your first content pack was focusing on entomology, was supposed to be finished this summer. How's it going so far?
Yep. It's actually done and it's up for down and the first module of the content pack entomology is up for download at agtechsteam.ca. So go check it out if you want to learn more. Be forewarned, the website isn't 110% completed yet, so some features may not work, but the main thing, the download button for the content pack does work. And there'll be a lot more coming soon with over the next few months and years.
Luke, you talked about the misconceptions people have about the ag industry, but what sorts of diseases should farmers really be concerned about that may be impacting their crops today and maybe in the future?
I think we should worrying about diseases that would impact our crop from the outside. We should be on the lookout for mutations. That's the real issue, is that we should be really on the lookout for mutations in viruses and bacteria. Because a lot of people forget that viruses and bacteria are living things too, and living things grow and change. And viruses and bacteria are known for mutating. So I think that's something we should be on the lookout for, is mutations in these diseases.
Luke, between school and your business, when do you have time to just be a kid and go out and ride your bike?
I make time. I make time usually when it hits like 3 or 4 o'clock. I just go, I'm done for the day. I just go and do whatever I please.
And what do your parents think of you becoming an entrepreneur at such a young age?
My dad is, I don't think my dad couldn't quite wrap his head around it. But my mom is extremely proud of me, and she helps me out a lot with all this stuff. I love you, Mom. She's sitting right next to me.
Luke Zielinski with AgTech Steam. Congratulations so far. Best of luck in the future. And thanks a lot for joining me today on Bridge City News.
You're welcome.
Raising a child with disabilities comes with challenges and victories. Throw in a global pandemic, and those challenges increase exponentially. Joining me now today is Dr. Edna Jacoto SM. She's the chair of family support for children with disabilities and a proud mom of 4 daughters, one of whom has Down syndrome and just turned 17. Dr. Edna Jacoto SM, welcome back to BCN.
Thank you, Hal. I'm happy to be here.
Now, Edna, one of your daughters is actually home from high school because of a recent outbreak here in Lethbridge.
Yes, she is. We got the text and the email last night, and so we had to scramble to get in touch with 811 to try to book a test for her. And the school has been amazing. They phoned right away to find out if everything was okay, and they just gave us the details. And then they phoned again today just to make sure that everything was fine and how schooling is going to roll out. But we are not quite sure yet because they are ready to teach and everything is online for her, but we have to be with her when she's studying. But since she's supposed to be in isolation, we are not quite sure how that's going to look like right now. So we still have to work on the details about how to be able to support her. She has her EA ready to go, but it's our end that we are trying to work out the details.
Now let's discuss parenting a child who has a disability or is differently abled. Tell me about this journey, what it's been like for you and your family.
I think initially was a bit of a surprise because we didn't know that we're going to have her with the disability. But I think that, with time, you get to understand more about the condition. And then you learn to appreciate just the strengths that she has. But I'm not going to say that it's been an easy journey. It's a challenging journey. It stretches you as an adult. It stretches you as a human being. But I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Now, when you were told that your daughter had Down syndrome, what were your thoughts and feelings about it initially?
I think it was shock because we didn't know, and fears about how life was going to be like because I didn't know much about Down syndrome at the time. But then as time went on, we sort of knew that it was going to be okay. We knew it was going to be a lot of work, but we knew that it was going to be okay. Now, let me backtrack a bit. One of the reasons that we found out was that she had a heart condition when she was born because her physical features were not very consistent since she's dark skinned because most whites who get it here, it's more visible. But because she's dark skinned, you needed to have experience to be able to identify. So they weren't quite sure, but they suspected because of the heart condition. So once they did the genetic testing and we were clear that we knew that, okay, we know what we are dealing with now. So it's been lots of up and downs, but I think that we are okay with it and she's doing amazing well. So
Now, Edna, you have 4 daughters. What is the family dynamic like? And more importantly, do you see any time in the bathroom?
I like that question. Well, family dynamics. Okay, so our oldest is 21, soon to be 22. And so she has been a really great big sister. And the 2 younger ones will tend to play together. And our daughter, she's the second one. So she's very independent. Let me just put it that way. She's super independent in the sense that she likes to do things by herself. But when she needs help, sometimes she doesn't want to ask, except when she sees a bug, like she sees an ant crawling, then she screams, help! But other than that, yeah.
Now, the COVID-19 measures and restrictions have probably been a challenge for you on many different levels. Now, what have you done to ensure your daughter is safe and is understanding of the situation, your child who has Down syndrome?
Well, we've done several things. First of all, she needed to understand what was going on. Initially, she didn't quite understand why she couldn't go to school. So when schools were shut down, we told her she couldn't go to school. And I think she didn't quite understand. So she likes to get her stuff ready the day before school. So she sets out her clothes and gets her backpack ready. The night before school, she even gets out her lunch bag and packs her lunch. So when we told her she couldn't go to school, I think she was a bit confused. And then when we told her that we had to go pick up her stuff from school, she thought she was going back to school. So she decided to pack her lunch bag. And I said, well, yeah, it's not that kind. We are just going to pick up your stuff. So after we came home and they started online schooling, I think she understood that she couldn't go back to school for a while. And so we explained to her, the school explained to her, and we tried to take her out on walks because she couldn't have any programming. We usually hire someone to help us on a private basis, but that person couldn't come into the house because of COVID, and her programming through an agency was cut short too. So we had to get creative in trying to do things just to get her engaged. And that was a bit of a challenge because my husband and I were both working from home. So trying to work from home and then make sure we engage her was a bit of a challenge.
Now, when everything was shut down during the pandemic, were any family support programs available to you and your family?
Yes and no. No, in the sense that she used to go to a program in town every Friday, and that was shut down. They tried Zoom, but it wasn't the same. She just wasn't as engaged as she would have been. And then she was involved in Special Olympics. That was shut down. She couldn't do that too. So everything was taken away, just like everybody else. But I guess with her, it was more challenging because she doesn't talk very much. So we had to constantly try to probe to find out what's going on. And she shut down completely because she likes routine. She knows when she wakes up, she goes to school, comes home, and she has that routine. So she shut down initially. throughout the summer, she actually didn't want to communicate much. But once the programs opened up a little bit in July, things got a bit better.
What have you heard about other families and how they've been impacted, other families who have disabled children, how they've been impacted by this virus and all of the COVID-19 measures?
I think that the impact comes in, well, depending on the nature of the disability. So if your child has very complex needs, it's obviously more difficult because then you have to get workers in. And so the government was very flexible in allowing parents to try as much as possible to customize their programs because there are regulations in place regarding whom you can hire to work in your home. Family members couldn't help you, but they were very flexible enough in agreeing to allow parents, upon request, to be able to make those changes so family members could help if people couldn't come into the home to help them.
Now, you are also the chair of the Lethbridge Christian School Parent Council. What support is there for children with disabilities right now?
Okay, so right now, I think that depending on the needs, if the kids are inside the school, they are able to support them. But I'm not quite clear on what is happening with kids who are not at school right now. Yeah, I still have to get clarification on that. But with kids who are in the school, they do have support.
Now, Edna, do you see any potential problems down the road or even right now when it comes to schools and how they've reopened, even during the pandemic?
I think that it's a very difficult situation and a complex one because on one hand, I think schools are good for the mental health of our children because, I could see even firsthand that it really affected my girls because they couldn't socialize with their friends. So that affected them. But on the other hand, we know that when they are exposed to other students, there's a potential to have that outbreak. So from my perspective, I think it's a very, very difficult situation, but we cannot live in a society that doesn't have any risks. So provided they are able to manage it, I think I'm okay with it. Personally, I'm okay with them going. But of course, this wouldn't work for every family. There are some parents who would choose to homeschool their kids. And I'm so thankful that in our province, that option exists for parents. So whichever one you choose, they are able to support you.
Let's talk about your daughter who has Down syndrome again for just a moment here, Edna. What kind of independence does she have now that you can really enjoy in life?
Oh my goodness. She can do things by herself, like she can go to the bathroom by herself. She doesn't need anyone to help her to go to the bathroom. When she's coming back from school, we drive her in the morning. When she's coming back, she comes home on the yellow bus. She gets off at her stop most of the time, and then she walks home. She's able to eat on her own. She can navigate the iPad technology more than I can. And those are skills that, like, I am so thankful for that she has those skills.
I mean, like most kids, she probably has hopes for her future. Has she talked to mom and dad about what she'd like to do when she grows up?
She doesn't say very much, so you have to prompt her. So next year she's going to turn 18, which is a big transition year, adult year for her. So we had so many plans in the spring to put in effect just to get her preparing for that stage. But unfortunately, because of COVID, all those plans were cut short. So we have to wait. And then just as things open up and we're ready to get things into motion, she's in isolation. So it's been up and down. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been a roller coaster ride, definitely. Edna, what advice would you offer parents who are struggling with raising a child with a disability?
I think, first of all, you have to see them as any other human being. I think you have to have that perspective that they don't have a deficit. That is just who they are. They have challenges in life. So you have to just accept them as human beings and treat them as human beings. Secondly, you have to see what they have to offer. You know, they may not have certain cognitive skills, they may not have certain physical skills, but maybe a smile. Just look for the good in what they have, because I personally believe that everyone has something to offer and they have something. I mean, she has enriched my life so much. I don't know how my life would have been without her. I've gotten to know lots of people that have made such a big difference that I wouldn't have known but for her. So I would say that just look at the positive, and when you are having a bad day, ask for help. It is so important because the emotional and physical strains of raising a child who has so many challenges, it can be overwhelming, but it's important to know that there is help out there, so you can talk to your caseworker, talk to family members, get a support group around you. And a lot of the groups that, you know, kids with special needs, they have different groups for different kinds of disabilities, if I should put it that way. So reach out to people and talk to people. It may look challenging, but you can overcome. And last of all, just take care of yourself. I think self-care is so important. Just get out, take a walk. It's not expensive. It doesn't cost money to get outside and enjoy the outdoors. So just get out there and enjoy the outdoors, clear your head, and talk to people. Yeah.
Amen to that. Edna, let's also talk about your faith and your relationship with God and how important that is, especially as you navigate through a pandemic and raising a child with a disability.
Oh my goodness. I think that has been the thing that has gotten me through all the challenges, because it's not easy. And so my faith actually has strengthened me in the sense that when I face challenges, I know that, you know, I may not know what lies ahead, but I can lean on God and know that, you know, He's always there, even when it seems like the sky is falling. He's always there to just see me through whatever challenges that I'm going through. And also, I have a very strong faith family that have been very, very supportive, and that has always helped. And also, I think that having a child with challenges drives you to ask questions. And if you don't look at the right place for the answers to those questions, your faith can be shaken. And that was what happened to me, because initially I was looking for answers. And then I realized that it's not a bad thing. I mean, having a child with needs is not a curse. You didn't do anything wrong. That is just who they are. And so when you have that understanding by getting into the word and knowing the word, it really, really helps. So I'll just encourage people that, you know, don't look at the wrong places for answers to your questions. Just make sure that if you're a person of faith, you know, get into your word, because you will never know what you will find every day that will strengthen you. That has always kept me going, because I try to get into the word as much as I can on a daily basis. Sometimes it's just one verse, you know, and we have YouVersion app, right? So you can just look at the verse of the day and just think about it during the day. And that really, really helps.
Amen. Well said. Dr. Edna Jakota Assem, Chair of the Family Support for Children with Disabilities, thanks for joining us today.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.